Imagine walking down an ancient corridor, where thick stone walls have witnessed centuries of secrets passing silently by. The air is cool, the echo of your footsteps bounces back faintly, and the dim glow of lanterns hanging above casts long shadows on the polished marble floor. At the very end of this passage, you see a door. Not just any door, but a door forged from heavy oak and iron, sealed with locks so intricate they look almost alive. A door so imposing, so silent, that it has earned a name whispered in reverence and fear. The door that never opens. Behind this door lies what many believe to be one of the greatest, most mysterious, and most controversial collections of knowledge ever assembled by human hands. The Vatican Secret Archives. Perhaps you've heard the name before. It sounds almost mythical, doesn't it? A shadow that hovers over history, half real, half legend. Millions of Catholics around the world know the Vatican as the beating heart of their faith, the center of power and the residence of the Pope. But only a handful of individuals have ever walked beyond that sealed threshold, and fewer still have touched the manuscripts, the scrolls, the fragile relics of ink and parchment hidden in the darkness beyond. That door does not simply open to a room. It opens to an entire parallel version of history, a version we are not allowed to see, a version filled with fragments and truths too dangerous, perhaps, to be known. And that raises a question: why? Why would a library, a house of knowledge, supposedly a beacon of light, be locked away in shadows? Why should the wisdom of centuries be confined, hidden, guarded by keys and silence? They call it the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, the Apostolic Archives, stretching mile after mile beneath Vatican City. Imagine shelves so vast that, if laid end to end, they would run longer than the span of a great city. Inside rest hundreds of thousands of documents, manuscripts, maps, letters, some dating back more than 1,000 years. But here's the truth. You and I will never see them. Only a very small portion has ever been made available to scholars. Access is tightly restricted, monitored, and limited. The rest, sealed, untouched, forgotten, or perhaps deliberately concealed. Over the centuries, rumors have swirled like whispers in the night. Some say the archives contain proof of the Nephilim giants mentioned in the book of Genesis. Others believe the missing Gospels of Mary Magdalene and Judas lie hidden here, their words contradicting the narrative the Church has preserved for centuries. There are claims that the truth about Jesus' bloodline, the secret of the Merovingian dynasty, or even the very existence of lost civilizations, lies buried in those boxes of parchment and dust. And then there are the stranger theories, still, that within these shelves rests evidence of contact with beings not of this earth, and maps of worlds humanity has forgotten. It sounds like fiction, doesn't it? Yet the silence of the Vatican has only fueled such fires. For if there were nothing to hide, then why hide it so completely? Picture this. You stand before that door. A cardinal walks past, his crimson robes sweeping across the floor. At his side, glinting faintly in the dim light, hangs a golden key, delicate, ornate, yet carrying the weight of power. You realize that this key is one of the few in the entire world that can turn the lock before you. But it does not belong to you, nor to the millions of believers waiting outside. It belongs only to those who decide what should be revealed and what should be left in silence forever. Perhaps behind that door there are only letters and administrative documents, faded decrees, dry accounts of centuries past. But perhaps just one parchment, one scroll, one hidden fragment could change everything we think we know about human history. The most unsettling truth is not that we don't know, it's that someone does, and they have chosen not to tell. That door stands there, unmoving, silent, immovable. It doesn't need to open to unsettle us. Its mere existence is enough to stir suspicion, curiosity, and longing. Enough to make us ask the question that has haunted seekers for centuries. What is being hidden, and why are we not allowed to know? Perhaps, in the quiet beyond that door, secrets older than nations are still whispering. And our journey into the forbidden shadows of the Vatican's library has only just begun. When the door finally opens, not for us, but for the select few, the world beyond is not one of light and revelation. Instead, it is a kingdom of shadows. Imagine stepping inside and feeling the sudden drop in temperature, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. The light is dim, carefully rationed to protect fragile manuscripts that cannot bear the kiss of the sun. Before you stretch corridors upon corridors, lined with towering shelves that seem to climb into the very darkness above. They say the archives contain over 50 miles of shelving, 50 miles enough to walk for hours and never see the same passage twice. Enough to bury thousands of stories, each one capable of reshaping the world. And yet, despite this unimaginable vastness, what outsiders are permitted to see is only a fraction, a sliver, a single thread of an enormous tapestry. Scholars who gain entry describe it not as a place of discovery, but of limitation. Requests must be specific, a particular document, a particular year, a particular file. There is no wandering here, no idle browsing through the shelves. You may not stumble upon forbidden truths by accident. Every movement is guided, every page monitored. The Vatican itself insists there is nothing sinister here. That secret is a mistranslation from the Latin secretum, meaning private. The archives, they say, are simply the private property of the Pope, kept away from the dust of public curiosity. Yet, the very existence of secrecy breeds suspicion. For what is private in the hands of the most powerful religious institution on earth? Consider this. The documents range from letters written by emperors to decrees issued by kings, from correspondence with scientists like Galileo to maps drawn centuries before Columbus ever set sail. Within these shelves lie the footprints of civilizations long gone, voices of rulers who shaped history, and perhaps records of decisions that never saw the light of day. But here is where the shadows grow darker. What we do know about the archives is unsettling enough. For instance, tucked away are letters between Pope Clement VII and King Henry VIII, the correspondence that set into motion the schism of the Church of England. Here lie records of the trials of the Knights Templar, when their fate was sealed, not by God, but by politics, cloaked in piety. There are documents on the Inquisition, testimonies wrung from trembling lips, judgments written with cold finality. And these are merely the fragments they have admitted exist. Whispers suggest that beneath the revealed layers lie the unrevealed scrolls, from the early church fathers that never reached the canon. Texts from the Gnostics, whose visions of Christ diverged from the accepted creed. Perhaps even scrolls from civilizations predating Christianity itself. Some believe the archives hide the Sibylline prophecies foretellings, so potent the Church feared their release. Others speak of letters exchanged with astronomers and inventors, their discoveries silenced because they clashed with doctrine. The atmosphere in this library of shadows is heavy with paradox. It is a temple of knowledge where curiosity is unwelcome, a place where truth has been preserved, not to be shared, but to be contained. Every book, every manuscript, every brittle scrap of parchment seems to murmur a question. Why am I locked away? What am I forbidden to say? Picture the shelves, wooden ladders leaning against endless rows, dust gathering in the corners, boxes labeled in careful Latin script. The silence is so deep you can almost hear the ticking of time itself. And as you walk through, you feel the strange awareness that you are not alone, not watched by men, but by the weight of centuries pressing down on your shoulders. One scholar once described the archives as a forest of forgotten voices. Another likened it to a cave of echoes, where history whispers only to those allowed to hear. Yet, even these metaphors fall short. For the mystery is not only what is hidden in the darkness, but why the darkness has been allowed to endure. Ask yourself, what could possibly lie within these shelves that would justify such secrecy? Administrative records, tax receipts, lists of bishops and their duties. The church claims as much, but the rumors persist. Could it be that within these walls rest writings that tell of other worlds, that prove other histories, that reveal truths about humanity's origins that would shake every pulpit and throne? The very design of the archives seems to encourage this speculation. The long corridors, the locked vaults, the layers of access like concentric circles guarding a forbidden core. Outsiders see only the outer walls. Even insiders, it is said, rarely glimpse the deepest chambers. One imagines a room far beneath the surface, sealed in stone, where the most fragile secrets rest. Perhaps an ancient gospel wrapped in silk, its ink faded but its message still sharp. Perhaps a map showing lands that modern science says should not exist. Perhaps bones, artifacts, or relics that tell a story different from the one we know. In this library of shadows, knowledge is not simply preserved, it is controlled. What you are allowed to know is carefully chosen, and what you are not allowed to know is hidden under lock, key, and silence. And so, the Vatican's archives remain a paradox, a treasure of wisdom and history, and at the same time, a fortress of silence. The question lingers in the air, unanswered. As you imagine those endless shelves, is this the world's greatest library of truth, or its most elaborate vault of secrets? If the Vatican archives are the fortress of secrets, then the Index Librorum Prohibitorum was the sword sharp, decisive, and wielded for centuries against knowledge deemed dangerous. The very name carries weight. The Index of Forbidden Books. It sounds almost medieval, as though conjured from the same world that burned witches and silenced heretics. Yet, the Index was no myth. For over 400 years, it was the official instrument by which the Catholic Church sought to control what humanity could and could not read. The Index began in 1559, in the turbulent years of the Counter-Reformation. Protestantism was spreading across Europe. Printing presses were multiplying ideas faster than they could be contained, and the Church was losing its monopoly on truth. To regain control, Pope Paul IV issued the first official list. It named not just individual works, but entire categories of thought, philosophy, theology, science, that were suddenly declared forbidden territory. Imagine living in that world. To open the wrong book was to risk your soul. To copy it, distribute it, or even defend it could lead to excommunication or worse. The Church had declared war, not on armies or nations, but on ideas. The Index grew over time, edition after edition. By the 20th century, it listed more than 4,000 works, a sprawling catalogue of suppressed voices, and within its pages, you find some of the greatest names in human history. Galileo Galilei, René Descartes, Jean-Paul Sartre, Giordano Bruno. Even entire movements, Enlightenment philosophers, political theorists, scientists found themselves silenced by decree. But perhaps the most telling part of the Index is not who was on it, but why. For the forbidden were not criminals or conspirators. They were thinkers, dreamers, rebels, explorers of truth. Their words were banned not because they lacked value, but because they held too much. The Index reveals something deeper about the Vatican's fear, that truth itself can be dangerous. Consider Galileo, his support of heliocentrism, the radical claim that the Earth revolves around the Sun was condemned not simply as an error of science, but as heresy. Why? Because it threatened the Church's interpretation of Scripture and, by extension, its authority. For daring to suggest that the universe was larger than the Church had taught, Galileo found his works banned, his voice silenced, and his life shadowed by trial. Consider Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, whose method of doubt and reason shaped centuries of thought. His works were condemned for dangerous rationalism, the idea that human reason could question dogma. And consider Bruno, his crime to speak of infinite worlds, countless suns, and civilizations beyond our own. He was not merely placed on the Index, he was burned at the stake in 1600. His books vanished into the shadows. The Index was not only about controlling ideas, it was about controlling imagination. To close off what humanity might dream of, what it might discover, what it might dare to believe. Now picture this. Within the Vatican archives, there may still rest the very manuscripts of these condemned thinkers. First editions, annotated by hand, locked away as relics of a battle between curiosity and control. If you could walk those shelves, perhaps you would find Galileo's marginal notes, or Descartes' private letters, or Bruno's cosmic visions preserved, yet forbidden. But the Index did not only target science and philosophy, it also turned its eye upon theology, the Gnostic Gospels, the Book of Enoch, the Gospel of Mary, all texts that told stories of Christ and the early Church, but from perspectives that diverged from the official narrative. They were branded heretical, dangerous, unfit for Christian eyes. To ban them was to protect the faithful, the Church said. But one must ask, protect them from what? From falsehood, from the possibility that truth was more complex than doctrine allowed. The Index was a map of absence, a mirror showing not just what was read, but what was denied. Each entry was a door closed, a thought suppressed, a voice cut off mid-sentence. And yet, paradoxically, the very act of banning gave these works a strange kind of immortality. For to forbid a book is to acknowledge its power. Even after the Index was officially abolished in 1966, its shadow lingers. The books may no longer be banned, but the question remains, what other writings were never even listed? What manuscripts were not simply forbidden but erased, hidden, locked in the deeper chambers of the archives? It is one thing to silence a book by decree. It is another to bury it so deeply that no one knows it ever existed. Here lies the mystery. The Index was public, an open declaration of control. But what of the hidden Index? The list not written for the world, but kept within the Vatican's own vaults. The catalogue of works so dangerous, so disruptive, that their very titles could never be admitted. Some whisper that this hidden Index includes the lost Sibylline prophecies, fragments of Atlantean knowledge, letters from Christ's apostles never canonized, perhaps even correspondence from beyond our world, evidence preserved but untouchable. And so, the Index of Forbidden Books is not just a chapter in history, is a symbol, a reminder that knowledge has always been a battlefield, that ideas can topple empires, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing a human can do is simply to ask, why not read? Why not know? For behind the iron door of the Vatican archives, the shadows deepen, not only with what was forbidden, but with what may never have been written at all. The Bible, as we know it today, feels complete. 66 books, divided neatly into Old and New Testament, bound together in one volume that billions regard as the Word of God. It seems fixed, unchanging, eternal. But in truth, the Bible we hold is the product of choices made long ago by councils of men who decided which voices would be heard and which would be silenced. For every gospel we read, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are others we never see, forgotten, forbidden, or deliberately hidden. These are the so-called missing gospels, texts that tell stories of Jesus and his followers that did not fit the mold of orthodoxy. The most famous among them is the Gospel of Thomas. Discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi in Egypt, it contains sayings attributed to Jesus, 114 in total. Yet, unlike the canonical Gospels, Thomas does not describe miracles or crucifixion. Instead, it emphasizes hidden knowledge, secret wisdom, the idea that the kingdom of God is not coming from the sky, but already within you. Whoever discovers the interpretation of these sayings, the Gospel claims, will not taste death. Such words shift the focus from the authority of the Church to the authority of the individual soul. They suggest salvation is not mediated by institution, but discovered through awakening. For the early bishops, this was dangerous. A Jesus who points inward threatened a church that demanded obedience outward. Then there is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, fragmentary, incomplete, yet haunting. Here, Mary is not merely a follower, but a confidant of Jesus, perhaps even his most trusted disciple. After his death, she comforts the others, revealing teachings he gave to her in private. But the male disciples resist. Did he really speak privately with a woman and not openly to us? They ask in disbelief. Peter rejects her authority. And yet, in the text, Mary holds her ground. Imagine what it would mean if this gospel had been canonized. The role of women in Christianity would have been transformed. Authority would not have been confined to the 12 male apostles. And perhaps the entire history of the church, its hierarchy, its structure would look different today. Another voice comes from the Gospel of Judas, long dismissed as legend. A copy surfaced in the 1970s and was eventually published in 2006. In this account, Judas is not the betrayer damned for 30 pieces of silver. He is the one disciple who truly understood Jesus' mission. The betrayal was not betrayal at all, but obedience to Jesus' request, an act that allowed the crucifixion and thus salvation to unfold. What would it mean if Judas, long vilified as the villain of the story, was in fact the most faithful of all? The moral axis of Christianity would tilt, and centuries of theology would shift. These missing gospels were not preserved in the Bible. They were branded apocryphal, consigned to the margins, or destroyed outright. But what if some copies survived? What if, in the labyrinthine vaults of the Vatican Archives, these texts still exist carefully preserved, waiting silently? Whispers persist that the Church holds more than it admits. That beyond the few fragments discovered in the sands of Egypt, there lie complete versions and broken manuscripts of Thomas, Mary, Judas, and others we may not even know by name. Some scholars believe there were more than 30 different Gospels circulating in the first centuries of Christianity. Only 4 were chosen. The rest were condemned. Why? One answer is unity. A church divided among competing stories would fracture. By fixing a canon, the bishops created a single narrative, a single authority. But another answer is fear. For these Gospels often emphasize direct experience of the divine, inner knowledge, mystical connection. They downplay hierarchy, law, and ritual. In other words, they weaken the power of institutions. And so, they were sealed away. Imagine the scene. Deep within the Vatican Archives, a chest of papyrus scrolls rests beneath layers of silk. Faded Greek letters whisper from the surface, still legible after 2,000 years. A text that could append centuries of theology lies there, untouched by public eyes, known only to a select few. If tomorrow the Gospel of Mary were revealed in full, would it confirm that she was more than history has allowed? Would it suggest a bloodline, a family, descendants who carried forward his name? If the Gospel of Judas were made public in its entirety, would Christianity's greatest traitor be reborn as its greatest servant? If the Gospel of Thomas were taught openly, would believers learn to seek the kingdom not in churches or rituals, but in the hidden chamber of the heart? Each missing gospel is more than a text. It is a mirror of a path not taken, a version of Christianity that might have been, but never was. And yet, the possibility that they still exist, complete, hidden, guarded is what fuels our fascination. For the sands of Egypt may yield fragments, but the sealed vaults of Rome may hold the whole. Why has the Church never released them, if indeed they are preserved? Perhaps to protect the faithful from confusion, perhaps to avoid division, or perhaps because they contain truths too destabilizing, too radical, too impossible to reconcile with the power structures built upon the canon we know. The shadows grow deeper when we consider this. If even the index of forbidden books listed works openly condemned, what of those never listed? What of the Gospels erased so completely that their very names were meant to vanish? To admit their existence would be to admit the fragility of the canon itself. And so, they remain missing. But missing does not always mean lost. Perhaps somewhere in a wooden crate marked with Latin letters, a missing gospel still lies in silence, waiting for the moment when a hand dares to lift the lid, when eyes dare to read what was never meant to be read. And perhaps, when that moment comes, the world we know will shift just as it almost did 2,000 years ago. If Gospels could be hidden, what else might lie behind the locked doors of the Vatican Archives? Some whisper that it is not only parchment and ink that sleep in those shadows, but bones larger than any man should have. Bones that once belonged to giants. The Bible itself speaks of them. In the book of Genesis, we find a passage both brief and haunting. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also, after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. These beings are called the Nephilim, part divine, part human, towering above ordinary men. They are remembered as warriors, rulers, perhaps even tyrants, and then they vanish. Some say they were destroyed in the flood, wiped clean from the earth by God's judgment. Others believe their bloodline continued, echoing in the legends of Goliath, the Anakim, and giants spoken of in cultures across the world. But what if they did not vanish entirely? What if their remains were discovered damned, hidden? Stories persist of skeletons unearthed in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Farmers digging in North America claimed to find bones far larger than human. Explorers in the Middle East told of skulls the size of helmets, femurs taller than a child. Newspapers of the time reported them with awe, before the stories faded into silence. Skeptics dismiss these accounts as exaggeration, myth, or hoax. But the whispers take a darker turn, that many of these finds were seized, taken away not by curiosity seekers, but by institutions of authority. Some claim the Smithsonian quietly removed them. Others point to the Vatican, suggesting that fragments of these ancient beings lie today not in museums, but in the deep vaults beneath Rome. Picture it, A wooden crate, stored not on a library shelf, but in a hidden chamber. Inside, bones wrapped in linen. A skull with a jaw too large, teeth too broad. Measurements carefully written on a slip of paper in Latin. The remains of a Nephilim boxed away, denied to history. Why would the church hide such evidence? The answer may lie in theology. For if the Nephilim were real, they confirm the strange, unsettling passages of scripture that many prefer to treat as metaphor. They suggest a mingling of heaven and earth, of angels and humans, a chapter of creation that does not fit neatly into doctrine. Worse still, they echo the Book of Enoch, an ancient text that expands on the Genesis story, describing in vivid detail how watchers, angels who descended to earth, fathered a race of giants. The Book of Enoch was excluded from the Bible, though it remains sacred in some traditions. Its visions of angelic rebellion, forbidden knowledge, and hybrid offspring were deemed too dangerous for the canon. Yet, fragments of Enoch survive, and if bones exist to match its stories, if giants once walked, the earth then silence becomes the only option. For to admit the existence of giants is to admit that angels walked among men, that creation is stranger than we are taught, that the boundaries of heaven and earth are thinner than we imagine. And so the rumors persist that in the lowest levels of the Vatican, beneath the shelves of manuscripts and papyrus, there are rooms that hold artifacts not made of ink but of flesh and bone. A vault of relics too powerful to display, too disruptive to reveal. Imagine walking those basements. The air grows colder, the light fades. Instead of bookshelves, you see sealed crates, stacked and numbered. Guards pass by with keys at their belts, and deep in the silence, something ancient rests. A femur longer than your arm. A skull whose empty sockets seem to stare across centuries. Evidence that the giants of Genesis were not myth, but history. Whispers say that even photographs exist, that explorers and archaeologists who stumbled upon such remains had their discoveries confiscated, their voices silenced, their reports buried, and that the only institution with both the motive and the means to preserve them without revealing them was the Vatican. It may sound fantastic, yet consider this. The Church has preserved countless relics, bones of saints, fragments of the cross, chalices, shrouds, objects tied to its history and faith. Why not also relics of the world before the flood? Relics that prove scripture in ways the Church fears to explain. For what would it mean for faith if giants were proven real? Would it strengthen belief in the literal truth of Genesis? Or would it unravel centuries of carefully crafted theology? Would it confirm the Book of Enoch with its tales of angelic unions and forbidden knowledge? Would it raise new questions about humanity's origins, questions too dangerous to answer? The basement of the Vatican, in this vision, is not merely a library. It is a crypt of hidden history, a place where bones and books alike are kept from the eyes of the world. Perhaps, as you imagine it now, a crate lies unopened. Dust gathers on its surface. Inside rests a skeleton too large to be ignored, and on the lid, a label written in Latin, Nephilim. The priests who walk the corridors above may never speak of it. The scholars who request access may never know it exists. But somewhere, perhaps in the deepest shadows of the archives, the giants of the earth still lie sleeping, waiting for the day when their story is finally told. If bones can be hidden, then what of the tablets, the stones, the ancient writings carved long before Moses ever set quill to parchment? For beneath the stories of giants and the flood lies an even older mystery, one that begins not in Jerusalem or Rome, but in the river valleys of Mesopotamia. The cradle of civilization, they call it. The land of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon. Here, in clay tablets written in the wedge-shaped strokes of cuneiform, humanity's earliest recorded stories come to life, and among them, a name appears again and again, the Anunnaki. In Sumerian myth, the Anunnaki were the great gods, those who came down from the heavens. They were not distant, invisible deities. They walked among men, ruled cities, and handed down knowledge. Some traditions describe them as judges of the underworld. Others portray them as celestial beings descending in fiery chariots. But the most controversial interpretation of all suggests something more radical, that the Anunnaki were not merely gods of imagination, but beings of flesh and power, perhaps not of this earth. The story grows stranger still. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Great Flood is described, eerily similar to the Genesis account. In other tablets, humanity is depicted as having been fashioned by the gods themselves, crafted from clay and divine essence, engineered for service. To some, this is myth. To others, it is memory, a fragment of truth from a time when gods and humans coexisted. And here is where the whispers point back to Rome. For if ancient tablets reveal that the Anunnaki shaped humanity, then Genesis itself takes on new meaning. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, the Bible declares. Who is us? Who is our? Could these plural pronouns hint at more than metaphor? Could they echo the same gods of Sumer? If so, then the Vatican has much to protect. Imagine the archives, not only holding the Dead Sea Scrolls, the apocryphal Gospels, but also translations of Mesopotamian tablets never released to the public. Documents that confirm humanity's origins not as a divine miracle, but as a Project An intervention. What would such a revelation mean? That we are not alone in the universe. That our creators were not merely spiritual, but physical. Some researchers claim the Vatican has in its possession Sumerian artifacts recovered during excavations in the Middle East. After all, the Church has been deeply entwined in archaeology for centuries. Missions, expeditions, even crusades brought back relics, not just from the Holy Land, but from lands older still. Could some of those fine stablets, seals, inscriptions be locked away beneath Rome? Picture a tablet of clay, marked with precise cuneiform strokes, fragile but still intact. The symbols, once translated, tell of beings who descended from the stars, who mingled with humans, who taught the arts of civilization. Imagine such a relic hidden in a wooden crate in the Vatican's basement, labeled simply Sumeria Restricted. Why hide it? Perhaps because it blurs the line between theology and myth, between God and gods. If the Anunnaki were real, then angels, watchers, and Nephilim are no longer matters of faith alone, they are history. And with that realization, the Church's monopoly on divine mystery begins to crack. There are even stranger whispers. Some claim that the Vatican possesses not only ancient texts, but knowledge of flying machines described in the tablets. The Sumerians spoke of fiery chariots, wings of storm, and craft that ascended to the heavens. Could these be descriptions of advanced technology? And if so, could the archives guard sketches, translations, or even fragments of devices discovered in forgotten ruins? Skeptics call it fantasy, yet the parallels are hard to ignore. Genesis speaks of the sons of God taking the daughters of men. The Book of Enoch describes watchers descending and teaching forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, weaponry, enchantments. Sumerian texts speak of gods who gave humankind wisdom, but also bound them in servitude. Different names, different languages, but echoes of the same story. And so, the question arises, are we reading myths or are we glimpsing memories? Consider the implications. If the Vatican were to admit the Anunnaki were real, then history as we know it unravels. Humanity's place in creation shifts. Religion must confront the possibility that its God is one among many. Science must face the possibility that we are the result not of chance evolution alone, but of deliberate design. This is not just academic curiosity, it is existential upheaval. And perhaps that is why, if such knowledge exists, it must remain sealed. To reveal it would be to destabilize the foundations of faith and empire alike. Better to preserve it in silence, to let the world continue in ignorance, than to risk the chaos of revelation. Yet silence has its own danger, for questions do not disappear simply because answers are hidden. They grow louder, whispered in corridors, painted in myths, and sought in forbidden archives. Imagine once more those endless shelves. Somewhere between papal decrees and ancient maps rests a translation of a Sumerian tablet, its words read quietly by candlelight, a tale of beings who came from the stars, who fashioned man, who walked the earth as rulers and giants. A tale that is not supposed to exist, but still does locked away, waiting. Perhaps the Anunnaki are myth, perhaps they are memory, perhaps they are both. But in the silence of the Vatican's basement, in the library of shadows and secrets, they may yet be preserved. Not to enlighten the world, but to guard it from truths it is not ready to bear. If the archives truly guard clay tablets and forgotten gospels, then what about relics? What about the most sacred artifact of them all, the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark is more than an object. It is legend, scripture, and myth intertwined. In the book of Exodus, God commands Moses to build it, a chest of acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold, topped with 2 cherubim whose wings meet in the center. Within it, the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments were placed. But the Ark was more than a container. It was a throne, a seat of divine presence. Wherever the Ark went, God's glory went with it. The stories surrounding it are fearsome. The Ark parted rivers, brought victory in battle, and radiated power so intense that touching it meant instant death. When carried before the Israelites, it was invincible. When stolen by enemies, it brought plagues. The Ark was, in essence, the physical embodiment of divine authority on earth, and then mystery. Somewhere after the destruction of Solomon's temple, the Ark disappears from history. The Bible falls silent. Its fate is never recorded, and so speculation fills the void. Some say the Ark was destroyed in the temple's fall. Others insist it was hidden before the Babylonians came, carried to safety in secret. Legends multiply. That it rests in Ethiopia, in a chapel guarded by priests who never leave. That it lies beneath the Temple Mount, buried deep in stone. That it was taken by the Knights Templar during the Crusades, and eventually delivered into the hands of the Church. And so, inevitably, the rumors point toward Rome. If any institution on earth might know the Ark's fate, it would be the Vatican. Its agents walked Jerusalem, its orders crusaded in the Holy Land, its networks reached into every corner of Christendom. And the Ark, more than any relic, represents power. Political power, spiritual power, the power to legitimize authority on earth as coming directly from heaven. Imagine if the Ark lies not in Ethiopia or Jerusalem, but in a sealed chamber beneath the Vatican. Imagine a wooden chest, gilded and ancient, hidden beneath layers of protection. Its golden cherubims still face each other, their wings nearly touching. Inside, the broken stones of Sinai still humming with the echo of a voice. What would such possession mean? To the faithful, it would prove beyond doubt the reality of divine encounter. To the world, it would make Rome not only the seat of Peter, but the keeper of the covenant itself. Yet if the Ark were revealed, it would also raise unanswerable questions. Why was it hidden for centuries? Why withheld from the world? Would nations demand it, claim it, fight for it? Would wars erupt over its custody, as wars once did in the days of Israel? Perhaps this is why silence reigns. The Templars add fuel to the fire. According to legend, during their time in Jerusalem, the knights excavated beneath the Temple Mount. Some believe they uncovered the Ark or fragments of it. When the Templars were suppressed, their treasures seized. What they had found may have passed into papal hands. Whispers say that after their destruction, some Templars were taken secretly to Rome, along with relics and scrolls too precious to burn. The Ark, if they had it, would have been the greatest prize. From there, it could have been hidden in the Vatican's depths, its existence known only to the highest ranks. Even today, Ethiopia claims to guard the Ark. In Oxium, the chapel of the tablet houses what they call the Covenant's resting place. But the Ark is never shown. The one priest allowed to guard it never leaves its side until he dies and is replaced. Could this be the real Ark or merely a copy, while the true chest rests elsewhere? The mystery deepens when we consider the Vatican's silence. Though it comments on countless relics, though it catalogues bones of saints and fragments of crosses, the Church says nothing about the Ark. Neither denial nor admission, only absence. And sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Picture yourself again in the archives. You walk past rows of manuscripts, then descend into stone corridors. The air grows heavier. Guards stand watch at iron gates. And somewhere, far below, lies a chamber not lined with books, but with lead. A chamber sealed against time. In its center rests a chest covered in gold, ancient yet unbroken, powerful even in silence. The Ark of the Covenant, not destroyed, not lost, but preserved, waiting for a day that may never come. Why keep it hidden? Perhaps to protect the world from its power, perhaps to guard the Church from chaos, or perhaps because, like so many other secrets, the Ark's reality does not align neatly with the narrative the Church has told. For if the Ark exists, then the line between history and myth is shattered, and with it, the fragile balance of faith, politics, and power. And so, the Ark remains, if indeed it remains at all, in shadow, neither proven nor disproven, neither revealed nor denied, but in the silence of the Vatican's vaults, in the echoing corridors of stone. One cannot help but wonder, does the golden chest still wait in the dark? Does the covenant still lie sealed in Rome? Perhaps one day the door will open. Until then, the Ark remains one of the greatest mysteries of all, hidden, not lost. If the Ark of the Covenant rests in silence, then who last carried it? Who touched its golden edges before it disappeared into shadow? Many point to a brotherhood both feared and revered, the Knights Templar. Their name alone summons an image: warriors in white mantles, emblazoned with the red cross, sworn to protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. But behind their vows of poverty and chastity lay something deeper. The Templars were not only knights, they were bankers, builders, explorers, and, some say, seekers of hidden knowledge. It was in Jerusalem, at the site of the destroyed Temple of Solomon, that the Templars established their headquarters. There, in the early 12th century, they began digging beneath the sacred mount. What were they searching for? Pilgrims thought it was simply fortification. But the whispers tell another story, that they uncovered tunnels, chambers, relics from Israel's ancient past, perhaps even the Ark itself. The chronicles are fragmentary, yet legends persist that the Templars carried from those excavations not only gold, but sacred knowledge. Manuscripts, scrolls, secrets lost to time. With these treasures, their influence grew. They became not merely warriors, but custodians of mysteries. Their sudden wealth, their secret rituals, their rapid rise all fueled suspicion that they had discovered something world-changing beneath Solomon's temple. And then came their downfall. In 1307, on a Friday the 13th that still echoes in superstition, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of every Templar. Accusations of heresy, blasphemy, and devil worship filled the air. The once mighty order was crushed, its leaders tortured, its Grand Master Jacques de Malle burned at the stake. But the strangest part of the story is what was never found. The supposed treasure of the Templars, the gold, the relics, the knowledge they had guarded vanished. The soldiers who stormed their commanderies found empty vaults, as though the Templars had known what was coming and spirited their secrets away. Where did it all go? Some say it was hidden in Scotland, carried by ships to distant shores. Others say it was preserved in secret lodges, the seed of Freemasonry. But one theory leads directly to Rome, that much of what the Templars held was seized not by kings, but by the Church. That in the aftermath of their destruction, their relics were transported quietly into the hands of the Pope, and from there into the archives. Imagine a chamber in the Vatican not filled with papal decrees, but with chests once carried by Templar hands. Inside, parchments describing their excavations, diagrams of the Temple Mount tunnels, perhaps even fragments of what they found, artifacts tied to Solomon, relics of the Ark, scrolls from an age long before. Why would the Church hide them? Perhaps because the Templars' discoveries contradicted the narrative. Perhaps because they hinted at truths that blurred the line between scripture and myth. Or perhaps because, in possession of such treasures, the Vatican secured its authority in silence. The Templars themselves became legend, woven into mythologies of secret codes, hidden bloodlines, and lost relics. Some claim they carried the Holy Grail, though the Grail itself remains an enigma, cup, bloodline, or knowledge preserved. Others insist they guarded the Shroud of Turin before it ever reached Italy. Still others whisper that what they truly protected was knowledge older than Christianity itself. Ancient mysteries passed down from the builders of Solomon's temple. And yet, wherever the Templars are mentioned, the Vatican's shadow is not far behind. For it was the Pope who sanctioned their rise and the Pope who signed their end. That tension, that paradox, continues to fuel suspicion. Did the Vatican destroy the Templars to seize their secrets? Consider this. After their suppression, the Templar rituals were condemned as heresy. But what if those rituals were not blasphemy at all, but fragments of ancient wisdom? What if the symbols they carved, the prayers they whispered, the codes they wrote all linked back to something unearthed in Jerusalem? Something so powerful that it could rewrite faith itself. And what if those fragments, those parchments, those relics still lie today? Hidden not in Scotland, not in Freemason lodges, but deep in the Vatican's underground vaults. Picture it, a heavy chest marked with the Red Cross, stored beside papal archives. Inside, relics dusted with centuries of silence, a map of Jerusalem's underworld tunnels, a scroll in faded Hebrew describing the Ark's resting place, a golden object, small yet radiant, part of a larger whole, the Templar treasure, not lost, but kept absorbed into the Vatican's private world. The Vatican itself never speaks of it. It neither admits nor denies. The Templars remain, in official memory, condemned heretics, but in the silent halls of the archives, perhaps their presence lingers, still in objects, in documents, in mysteries the Church dares not release. For if the world knew that the Templars found the Ark, or fragments of it, or knowledge of the Nephilim, or even proof of the Anunnaki, then the entire balance of history would tilt. The Church would no longer be the sole custodian of revelation. The Templars, once burned as heretics, would be vindicated as keepers of truths too great for their age, and so their silence remains. The connection between the Templars and the Vatican is not only one of betrayal, but of inheritance. Whatever secrets the knights carried may not have died in the flames of 1307. They may still rest in shadow in Rome, as you walk once more through the imagined corridors of the archives. You see not only papal decrees and forbidden gospels, but a faint red cross painted on an old wooden chest. Its paint is chipped, but still visible. You lean closer. On its lid, words carved in Latin, non aperitur, do not open. And in that moment, you wonder, what would be unleashed if it ever were? What is more dangerous than history? The future, if the Vatican archives truly hold forbidden gospels and relics of giants. Then perhaps the most unsettling treasures are not what has already happened, but what has yet to come. Prophesies visions of the end, warnings of upheaval, whispers of catastrophe illed away in silence. Prophecies have always haunted the Church. Some were embraced, canonized, and preached from pulpits. Others were buried, suppressed, or dismissed as heresy. Yet the line between false prophecy and forbidden prophecy has always been thin. For what if some visions were not wrong, but to right, to precise, to threatening to the power of the present? Among the oldest are the Sibylline books. In the ancient world, the Sibyls were oracles, women who spoke in ecstatic visions, their words treasured and feared by emperors. Rome once kept a collection of these prophecies in the Temple of Jupiter, consulted in times of crisis. Most were lost when the temple burned, but fragments survived. Some scholars whisper that the Vatican still guards copies or commentaries hidden away when Christianity replaced Rome's pagan order. What might they contain? Warnings of plagues, of fire, of kingdoms falling. Did the Sibyls foresee not only the rise of Christ, but the crises of the Church itself? To admit their accuracy would be to admit that truth is not confined to Scripture alone. Then there is the prophecy of the popes, attributed to Saint Malachy in the 12th century. According to legend, Malachy received a vision of all future popes, each described in a cryptic Latin motto. For centuries, these mottos seemed obscure, meaningless until history unfolded and uncanny connections appeared. One pope described as de medietate luna, from the half of the moon, was born during a half moon. Another, pastor et neuter, pastor and sailor, was a bishop from a seafaring family, and so on, each line falling eerily into place. Most chilling of all is the final prophecy. After a pope described as Gloria Olivae would come the last, called Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. Under his reign, the prophecy says, the city of 7 hills, Rome, would be destroyed, and judgment would come. Is it coincidence, fabrication, or foresight? The Vatican dismisses the prophecy as apocryphal. Yet the whispers persist that in the archives lies a complete version, longer, clearer, perhaps naming not only popes, but events yet to come. To reveal it would be to unleash panic. To conceal it is to hold history's future hostage. But perhaps no prophecy is as shrouded in secrecy as the third secret of Fatima. In 1917, 3 children in Portugal claimed to see visions of the Virgin Mary. Over months, she revealed to them 3 secrets. The first described a vision of hell. The second foretold the rise and fall of Russia, and the need for its consecration to Mary's heart. The third, the most mysterious, was not revealed until decades later. Officially, the Vatican released it in 2000. The text described a vision of a bishop dressed in white falling among ruins, killed by soldiers. Many interpreted it as a symbolic reference to the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. But critics remain unconvinced. The children spoke of terrifying images: oceans flooding the earth, fire raining from the sky, entire nations wiped out in moments. Yet the Vatican's published text contained only a vague allegory. Even one of the visionaries, Sister Lucia, hinted that the released version was incomplete. Is it possible that the Vatican revealed only part of the third secret? That the true vision, perhaps apocalyptic, perhaps cosmic, remains sealed in the archives? If so, then somewhere in the Vatican lies a letter, handwritten, describing not only symbols but details. A future too grim to reveal. Consider what that means. If the Church withholds prophecy, then it knows something we do not. Something about our destiny, our future, perhaps even our end. Imagine walking through the archives, past rows of papal decrees and Templar chests, into a smaller room. Here, no shelves stretch for miles. Instead, a single desk holds a folder. Inside, a prophecy written in careful Latin, marked with the papal seal. On the outside, one phrase: "Do not open until the appointed time." What might it say? That a star will fall from the heavens, that the seas will rise, that nations will burn, or that the Church itself will fall, undone not by enemies but by its own hidden truths. To reveal such words would be to change the course of history. To conceal them is to let history unfold unprepared. Either choice is dangerous. Either choice demands silence. And so, the prophecies remain locked away. The Sibyl's whisper from forgotten pages. Saint Malachy's mottos gather dust. The third secret of Fatima lies sealed, perhaps only partially told. But secrecy does not erase them. It only deepens the mystery. For if the past can be hidden and the present can be censored, then what of the future? The Vatican's Library of Shadows may not only preserve what was, but what will be. And if those prophecies are true, then perhaps one day we will all learn why the door never opens, because, behind it, the future already waits, too terrifying to face. We often imagine the Vatican as the guardian of faith, scripture, and relics. But what if it is also the guardian of science? Not science celebrated and shared, but science locked away, silenced, and forgotten. Throughout history, the relationship between the Church and science has been uneasy. Sometimes supportive, sometimes adversarial, often marked by silence. The archives are said to hold not only papal bulls and gospels, but also letters, treatises, and discoveries knowledge, centuries ahead of its time, hidden in the shadows. Think first of Galileo Galilei, the father of modern astronomy. He dared to suggest what Copernicus had whispered before him, that the earth revolved around the sun. For this, he was summoned to Rome, tried by the Inquisition, and forced to recant. His books were placed on the index of forbidden works, his telescope's revelations buried beneath dogma. But imagine what else lies in the archives. Letters between Galileo and bishops who secretly agreed with him but feared the truth. Diagrams of the solar system, annotated with observations never published. Notes of experiments on motion, gravity, optics that could have propelled science centuries forward had they been allowed to breathe. And Galileo was not alone. Consider Giordano Bruno, whose vision extended even further. He spoke of an infinite universe, filled with countless suns and worlds, perhaps even inhabited. For this, he was condemned and burned at the stake. Were his manuscripts destroyed, or were they preserved in silence, hidden in a drawer deep within the archives? His cosmic vision too radical to admit, yet too valuable to discard. What other sciences might be locked away? Whispers speak of ancient medicine remedies drawn from manuscripts long before modern pharmacology. Formulas for herbal cures, treatments for diseases we still struggle with today. Some claim the archives hold knowledge passed from Alexandria before its library burned scrolls on anatomy, surgery, and healing arts now lost to us. Imagine if a cure for plague, or even cancer, was written on papyrus thousands of years ago, sealed in Rome but never revealed. Others speak of astronomy, that within the archives are ancient maps of the stars, charts more precise than medieval technology could have drawn. Some even suggest documents describing strange objects seen in the skies, what today we might call unidentified flying phenomena. If the heavens held more than stars, did the Church conceal such accounts to protect doctrine? And then there is technology. Medieval rumors tell of alchemists who discovered machines, formulas, or devices that seemed impossible for their time. Leonardo da Vinci himself sketched inventions centuries before they could be built. Flying machines, tanks, submarines. He died under the watchful eye of the Church, his notebooks scattered. Could some of those missing works rest now in the archives, locked away because they revealed too much, too soon? The pattern is clear. Knowledge that disrupts order. Knowledge that challenges authority. Knowledge that leaps ahead of its time. This is the kind of knowledge most likely to be silenced. Imagine walking through a restricted room of the archives, not of gospels, but of diagrams. Shelves lined with manuscripts bound in leather, filled with sketches of machines never built. A parchment showing the inner workings of the human heart centuries before modern anatomy. A scroll describing the motion of planets, drawn by an ancient stargazer whose name has been forgotten. Dust gathers, but the ink still whispers. Humanity could have been further, faster, freer. Why hide it? Perhaps because to reveal such science in its time would have destabilized the world. If the earth revolved around the sun, then humanity was not the center of creation. If there were infinite worlds, then Christ's story was not singular. If disease had natural cures, then miracles were not the only hope. Each discovery threatened not only belief, but power. So perhaps it was safer to lock the knowledge away, to preserve it but not share it, to keep it sleeping in the shadows. But the deeper mystery is this: what if some of that knowledge did not come from human hands at all? What if some of the manuscripts describe gifts of the Watchers? The forbidden knowledge the Book of Enoch says was given by angels' knowledge of metallurgy, weapons, enchantments, and the secrets of the heavens. If the Vatican possesses such manuscripts, then science and myth are not separate, but entwined. Our advances may be rediscoveries of truths once known, hidden, and then revealed in time. And yet, the silence remains. In the archives, the hidden science waits, whether astronomy, medicine, or technologies we cannot yet imagine. Perhaps humanity was meant to have them later, not sooner. Perhaps the Church believed it was protecting the world from itself. Or perhaps, by guarding such truths, it was protecting its own authority. As you imagine the endless shelves, you see not only scrolls and scriptures, but blueprints glowing faintly in candlelight. In the margins, a warning is written in Latin: non licet revelare, it must not be revealed. And you realize, perhaps the greatest discoveries of humankind are not yet to be made. Perhaps they were already made, long ago, then locked away in silence. If science could be silenced, then what of darker arts knowledge, not of telescopes or medicine, but of spells, symbols, and transformations. For deep in the whispers surrounding the Vatican archives lies another rumor, that the Church guards not only Holy Scripture, but the very books it once condemned as sorcery. Imagine a library within the library, not of gospel, but of grimoires, not of philosophy, but of alchemy. A vault where pages of ink and sigils are locked away, their bindings too dangerous to touch. Throughout the Middle Ages, Europe trembled at the shadow of magic. To summon spirits, to read the stars, to transmute metals, these acts were branded heresy, punishable by fire. And yet, even as the Church condemned such practices, it also collected them. For every book burned in a town square, another may have been confiscated, catalogued, and sealed in the archives. One name rises again and again in the whispers, the Key of Solomon. This grimoire, attributed to King Solomon himself, describes rituals to command angels and demons, to call forth spirits, to bind powers of heaven and hell. It speaks of circles drawn on the ground, incantations whispered in sacred names, symbols carved in ink and blood. Most surviving copies date from the Renaissance, but some say older manuscripts exist, perhaps originals kept far from prying eyes. If such texts truly survive, then the Vatican does not merely guard holy relics, it guards the very instructions for opening gates between worlds. Alchemy, too, lingers in rumor, not merely the quest to turn lead into gold, but the deeper pursuit of transformation, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of immortality, the union of opposites. Figures like Paracelsus, Hermes, Trismegistus, and Nicholas Flamel were accused of trafficking in mysteries too dangerous to reveal. Their works were censored, banned, suppressed. Yet the archives are said to contain entire shelves of alchemical manuscripts, recipes, diagrams, and formulas never released. Why keep them? Perhaps to study, perhaps to protect, or perhaps because in those faded pages lies not only superstition, but fragments of truth. For even modern science has roots in alchemy, chemistry, medicine, metallurgy, all grew from it. What if some texts contain knowledge not yet rediscovered? The whispers grow darker still. Some claim the Vatican possesses grimoires of summoning books, said to describe how to conjure angels, demons, or entities beyond. Texts such as the Testament of Solomon, the Book of Abramelin, or fragments of the Enochian system tied to John D., Queen Elizabeth's advisor, who claimed to speak with angels. Officially, such works are condemned. Yet unofficially, they may rest in silence, hidden so that no unwise hands can wield them. For even to read such words is to invite their power. Picture the scene in a candlelit chamber beneath Rome. A table holds a leather-bound volume. Its cover is cracked, its edges scorched, as though it once survived fire. Inside, symbols spiral across the page circles, within circles, names in a language not spoken for centuries. A priest turns the pages with gloves, his eyes careful not to linger. For he knows some words are not meant to be read aloud. Why would the Church keep such works at all? One reason is control. To destroy knowledge is to risk its return, scattered and uncontrolled. To preserve it is to contain it, to watch it, to ensure it cannot be unleashed. Another reason is curiosity. For if angels and demons are real, then their names, their signs, their rituals are evidence. To burn them is to erase history. To keep them is to hold proof of it if it must never be used. And yet, the paradox grows. The Church that burns witches may secretly guard the very spells it condemns. The priests who denounce alchemy may study its manuscripts in silence. The institution that preaches purity may keep in its basement the darkest words ever written. Some even suggest the archives hold talismans and relics of magic amulets inscribed with Hebrew names, artifacts taken from mystics, chalices used in forbidden rites, objects confiscated, sealed, and never returned. The thought chills that the Vatican does not merely preserve history, but binds it, that it has become the warden of powers too dangerous to release, yet too valuable to destroy. And so, the shadows deepen. Imagine again walking through the archives, beyond the shelves of papal decrees, beyond the crates of relics. You enter a small chamber. It smells of incense and iron. On a shelf lies a row of black-bound volumes. Each bears a sigil instead of a title. One glows faintly when the candlelight strikes. Another seems warm to the touch, though untouched for centuries. At the end of the row rests a locked chest. On its lid, carved in Latin, Non Aperitur, Nisi, Sacerdoti, Electo, open only to the chosen priest. Inside, perhaps, the pages of a book no eye has seen for 100 years. A book that claims to teach how to bind a spirit, how to command a storm, how to glimpse the future through fire. If such things exist, then the Vatican archives are not merely a library. They are a vault of power, scientific, spiritual, and magical. A place where the boundaries between faith and fear blur, and where the greatest danger may be not what is false, but what is true. For if these grimoires, these alchemical texts, these forbidden books of magic truly survive, then humanity's story is far stranger than we know, and the silence of the Vatican is not just secrecy, it is guardianship, or perhaps it is possession. Some secrets are carved in stone, others are whispered in prophecy, but the most dangerous of all are written not on parchment, but in blood. For beyond relics, beyond gospels, beyond grimoires, the Vatican archives are rumored to contain something more intimate: genealogies, family trees, lineages traced across centuries, and among them, a bloodline that could change everything we believe about history and faith. The whispers begin with Mary Magdalene. To some, she is a saint, a follower of Christ, honored in Scripture. To others, she is something more, not merely a disciple, but a partner. Some apocryphal Gospels portray her as the one Jesus loved above all others, the one he entrusted with secret teachings, the one the male apostles envied and resisted. From this grows the legend that Mary and Jesus were bound not only in spirit, but in family, that she bore his children, that a bloodline descended, carried forward quietly through history. This idea may sound sensational, but it has endured for centuries, whispered in heretical texts, hinted at in symbols, encoded in legends. The Merovingian dynasty of France, the first kings of the Franks, was long rumored to claim descent from this sacred line. Their symbol was the fleur-de-lis, a stylized lily, often linked to Mary. Their power was mysterious, their aura different from other monarchs. Some saw in them not just kings, but heirs of something far older. The Vatican has always denied such claims, and yet, imagine what lies sealed in the archives: ancient genealogies preserved from the earliest centuries, tracing families through Rome, Gaul, and beyond. Papal records of marriages, births, dynastic alliances, all meticulously written. Could they reveal a hidden thread woven through European royalty, linking back to a single root in Judea? If such records exist, they would be explosive, for they would suggest that Christ's legacy was not only spiritual, but biological, that his descendants walked the earth as kings, perhaps still do. And this raises a chilling question. Did wars, crusades, and inquisitions serve not only politics and faith, but the quiet erasure of a bloodline? Did the Church protect its authority by ensuring that no rival heirs could claim divine right? Consider the Templars again. Some believe they guarded this very secret, that beneath the Temple Mount, they uncovered genealogies or relics proving the bloodline. Their destruction, then, was not only about power or wealth, but about silencing what they knew. If so, then what they found may have passed into the Vatican's hands, buried beneath layers of secrecy. Imagine walking through the archives into a dimly lit chamber. Here, not dusty manuscripts of theology, but scrolls of family lineage. Names written in Latin, Hebrew, Greek, coats of arms, seals of royal houses. Among them, a scroll marked with a red lily, its parchment fragile, its ink faded, but its message clear. A family tree that does not end at the cross, but continues through centuries. Such a scroll, if revealed, would unravel the foundation of Christian orthodoxy. The Church has always taught that Jesus' kingdom is not of this world. But if he had descendants, then his kingdom would be both divine and earthly, a dynasty of flesh and blood, not only of spirit. And if that dynasty still exists, the bloodline endures then, who holds it now, a king in shadow, a family unknown to history, or perhaps someone who does not even realize their inheritance. This possibility has inspired novels, films, and theories. But beneath the fiction lies the unsettling chance that fragments of it may be true. For genealogical records are real. The Church has preserved them for centuries: baptismal records, marriage registries, PayPal correspondences. They are the most mundane of documents, and yet they hold power. To trace a line across centuries is to reveal what has been forgotten. Perhaps somewhere in the Vatican's vaults, a sealed book contains such a line. Perhaps it is guarded more carefully than relics of gold, because its implications are far greater. Gold dazzles the eye, but blood changes history. What would it mean if the Vatican one day admitted it? That a bloodline exists, reaching back to Jesus himself. Would it strengthen faith or destroy it? Would believers see it as proof of his humanity, or as a betrayal of his divinity? Would kings and nations rise to claim authority through it? Wars have been fought for less, and so the bloodline remains, if it exists at all, in silence. A secret too volatile to speak, too dangerous to destroy. The fleur-de-lis glimmers faintly in imagination, a symbol of purity, of Mary, of something hidden in plain sight. It may be only legend, or it may be a code, pointing to truths known only by those who walk the silent corridors of the Vatican archives. In the end, perhaps the greatest secret is not in manuscripts or relics, but in flesh. For history is written not only in ink, but in DNA. And if one day the world learns that Christ's blood still flows in human veins, then everything faith, power, history will be rewritten. Until then, the bloodline sleeps, not dead, not gone, but hidden, woven into the fabric of time, preserved in silence, waiting for the moment it is revealed. Blood may write the story of families, but maps write the story of worlds. And within the Vatican archives, some whisper, lie maps that tell of worlds we are not meant to remember. Civilizations rise and fall, leaving behind ruins, myths, and fragments of stone. But some vanish so completely that they become legend. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, civilizations said to have flourished before recorded history, destroyed by floods, earthquakes, or cataclysms. To mainstream history, they are myth stories to inspire poets, not archaeologists. Yet the rumors persist that documents in the Vatican archives contain records of these very worlds. Take Atlantis. Plato wrote of it as a great island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, rich in knowledge, technology, and power, destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe. Scholars dismiss it as allegory, a parable about hubris. But what if the archives preserve a different account in ancient writings or maps that place Atlantis not in metaphor but on the globe? Some claim that explorers, long before Columbus, charted lands that should not have been known. The Peary race map of 1513, drawn by an Ottoman admiral, shows parts of South America and Antarctica with eerie precision centuries before official discovery. Could the Vatican possess even older maps, charts from before the flood, preserved through Noah or other survivors, passed down through secret channels? Imagine a parchment map locked in a Vatican drawer. The coastlines of continents familiar, but shifted ice-free Antarctica, submerged islands, shorelines that no longer exist, a geography of a world before the world we know. Then there is Lemuria, a supposed lost continent in the Indian Ocean, theorized in the 19th century but rooted in far older myths. Some say it was a cradle of humanity, home to a great civilization erased by rising seas. Fragments of this legend appear in Tamil traditions, in Polynesian myths, even in esoteric texts of the West. Could the Vatican's missionaries, traveling across the globe, have collected these stories, writing them down, preserving them in the archives? Stories that, woven together, revealed that Lemuria was more than legend. And what of Mu, said to be a vast continent in the Pacific, a civilization of wisdom destroyed by fire and sea? Dismissed as fantasy, yet Polynesian chants and Mesoamerican myths echo its memory. Could the archives hold translations of oral traditions gathered by missionaries' records that mainstream science ignored but the Church preserved? But the question grows deeper still. Why hide such records? Because to admit that civilizations rose before ours, with knowledge equal or greater, is to shatter the timeline we accept. To reveal that Atlantis, Lemuria, or Mu truly existed is to admit that humanity's story is not linear, but cyclical, that we rise, we fall, and we forget. And perhaps, hidden in those records, is the greatest fear, that our own age is not immune. Imagine again the corridors of the archives. You step into a chamber not of theology, but of cartography. Shelves of rolled parchments, atlases bound in leather. Dust clings to their edges, but their seals remain intact. One is marked with a symbol of waves, another with a serpent coiled around the earth. You unroll a parchment, and there drawn in ink long faded are lands that no modern atlas records. Islands now sunken, continents erased, cities where there is now only ocean. Perhaps these maps are not myth. Perhaps they are memory, preserved through the flood, carried by survivors, written down by scribes, and finally hidden by Rome. The Church, after all, has always known the power of maps. To chart the heavens is to define the cosmos. To chart the earth is to define dominion. And to hide maps is to hide knowledge. Could this be why the archives are said to hold forbidden atlases records, not of the world as it is, but of the world as it was? Could this be why whispers claim the Vatican knows of places still undiscovered, ruins still buried, secrets still waiting in ice and sea? Even Antarctica appears in the rumors. Some insist the archives hold ancient records, describing it not as a frozen wasteland, but as a green and habitable land. If true, then someone mapped it before ice consumed it thousands of years ago. Who? Survivors of Atlantis, ancient mariners, beings from beyond. To admit such maps exist is to admit that history is not what we think, that our ancestors were not primitive wanderers, but heirs of civilizations erased by catastrophe, and that our own fragility mirrors theirs. The silence of the Vatican grows heavier here, for relics of saints may inspire faith, but relics of forgotten empires inspire questions. Questions about who we are, where we came from, and where we are going. As you imagine the maps sealed in shadow, you realize they are not merely geography. They are warnings. Proof that worlds can vanish, that seas can rise, that civilizations can fall into myth. Proof that we, too, may not be as eternal as we believe. Perhaps one day, a scholar will open a drawer, unroll a map, and reveal a world we thought was only legend. Until then, the lost civilizations remain hidden not under waves, but under keys and silence. The Vatican has always been seen as the throne of the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, successor of Peter, the Vicar of Christ. But some whisper that another figure lurks in the shadows, one whose power is equal to war, greater than that of the white-robed pontiff the world sees. They call him the Black Pope. The title does not refer to race, but to the color of his robes. It is a name given to the superior general of the Jesuit order, the Society of Jesus, founded in the 16th century by Ignatius of Loyola. To the world, the Jesuits are missionaries, educators, and scholars. They run universities, serve as advisors, and travel to the edges of the earth to spread faith and knowledge. But to conspiracy and legend, they are something more. The hidden order, the secret architects of history. Why the suspicion? Because the Jesuits swore vows unlike any other order. They pledged not only poverty, chastity, and obedience, but a special obedience to the Pope, an oath so strict that it gave them access to the deepest chambers of power. Over time, they became confessors to kings, advisors to rulers, and, some claim, keepers of secrets too great for public eyes. The superior general, head of the Jesuits, came to be known as the Black Pope because, unlike the Pope in white, he commanded power in silence. While the Pope ruled in ceremony, the Jesuit general ruled in strategy. And where does the legend turn? To the archives. It is said that the Black Pope is one of the very few granted unfettered access to the Vatican's secret collections, that the Jesuits are not merely advisors, but gatekeepers of hidden knowledge. From forbidden gospels to maps of Atlantis, from grimoires of magic to genealogies of bloodlines, all pass beneath their gaze. Some even claim the Jesuits orchestrated the preservation of certain texts during the Counter-Reformation, that when libraries were burned and heretical works destroyed, the Jesuits quietly removed manuscripts, not to eliminate them, but to store them. A secret knowledge kept not for the public, but for the order. Consider their reputation: masters of education, guardians of discipline, men who shaped minds across centuries. Could they not also have shaped history itself by deciding what truths to reveal and what to keep in shadow? The idea is not without precedent. In the 17th century, Jesuit astronomers mapped the heavens with precision. Jesuit mathematicians influenced science. Jesuit missionaries recorded languages and cultures across the world. Their hunger for knowledge was insatiable. If they gathered wisdom from China, from the Americas, from Africa, did they not also gather fragments of forgotten civilizations? And where would such fragments be kept, if not the archives? The whispers grow darker still. Some say the Jesuits were tied to the suppression of the Templars, that their rise followed the Templars' fall, inheriting not only their role as defenders of the faith, but also their secrets. The red cross of the Templars, replaced by the black cassock of the Jesuits, different robes, same shadow, and the Black Pope, what of him? Officially, he is but the superior general, elected by his order, a servant of the Pope, but unofficially, Some believe he pulls strings behind thrones, that kings, presidents, even popes themselves have listened to his counsel, that the Jesuit order became so powerful that at times even popes tried to suppress them only to see the order restored. More influential than before. Imagine walking through the archives, not alone this time, but guided by a man in black robes. His face calm, his eyes sharp, his hand resting on keys no ordinary priest may carry. He knows where to go, what drawer to open, what scroll to reveal. He walks not as a visitor, but as a master. And you realize, this is the figure the world does not see, the guardian of truths locked away. What truths? Some say the Jesuits know the fate of the Ark. Others that they guard the Sibylline prophecies, the complete gospel of Mary, the bones of giants. Still others whisper that they hold not only the past, but the future, that their hands shape the very flow of history. Is it legend? Perhaps, but history shows the Jesuits were expelled from nations across Europe more than once, accused of political meddling, of controlling crowns from the shadows. Where there is smoke, there is fire, at least a hidden hand stirring the embers. And so, the Black Pope becomes a symbol, not only of the Jesuits, but of the hidden order within the Church. The one who commands in silence, who watches what others cannot, who decides what is revealed and what is buried. It is said that when the Pope speaks, the world hears. But when the Black Pope speaks, only a chosen few listen and act. In this vision, the Vatican archives are not simply a collection of history. They are a chessboard. Every book, every relic, every prophecy a piece. The Jesuits and the Black Pope above them move those pieces quietly, strategically, ensuring that the game always unfolds as they wish. Whether true or myth, the idea lingers, that the White Pope may bless the faithful, but the Black Pope commands the shadows, that beneath the splendor of St. Peter's lies another throne, invisible but immense, upon which the true power sits. And in that throne's shadow, the door to the archives remains locked not by accident, but by design. What if, one day, the doors of the Vatican archives were unlocked, not for a handful of scholars, not for a select few, but for the entire world? Picture it, the golden key turning in the heavy lock, the hinges groaning as the massive door swings open. For centuries it has been closed. Now, for the first time, sunlight floods the corridors of shadow, and humanity, all of humanity, is invited inside. What would we find? First, the missing Gospels, scrolls of Thomas, Mary, Judas complete, unbroken, their voices restored. The faithful would read them and see a Jesus both familiar and strange, a faith both familiar and reimagined. Would churches crumble, or would new ones rise? Would believers lose their certainty, or discover a deeper, hidden wisdom long denied? Next, the giants. Imagine bones brought from crates, laid out in the light of day, skeletons taller than doors, skulls with jaws that do not fit human proportion. The legends of Genesis, the book of Enoch, the whispered stories of Nephilim, suddenly not myth, but proof. Archaeology rewritten in a heartbeat. Humanity forced to ask, who were we? Who walked this earth before us? Then the Anunnaki. Clay tablets unsealed, their cuneiform etched clearly. Stories of beings who came from the sky, who made mankind from clay, who walked among us as rulers. If those words matched the Genesis story, if they echoed in gospels and myths across the world, how could we deny them? The line between God, gods, and visitors from the stars would blur. The mystery of our origin would deepen, not diminish. The Ark of the Covenant might stand in a chamber, its golden cherubim gleaming after centuries of silence. Imagine the outcry, the awe, the chaos. Nations would demand it. Pilgrims would flood to it. Wars could erupt over its custody. But beyond politics, one truth would emerge, that the sacred chest of Exodus was no allegory, but an artifact, preserved in secrecy until now. The Templar chests might be opened too, revealing scrolls carried from beneath Solomon's temple, maps of tunnels, documents of rituals, relics once called heresy but now undeniable history. The knights once burned as heretics would be vindicated as keepers of forbidden truths. And then the prophecies. Imagine the Sibylline books, laid open, their warnings read aloud. The complete prophecy of Saint Malachy, naming popes, describing the end of days in detail. The third secret of Fatima, revealed in its entirety, oceans rising, fire raining from the sky, a vision too grim to deny. Humanity would tremble, not at what has been, but at what is yet to come. And the hidden science, manuscripts showing heliocentrism centuries before Galileo. Anatomical drawings with uncanny precision, blueprints of machines that should not exist in their time. Proof that humanity could have been centuries more advanced had knowledge not been locked away. Every invention we thought modern would be seen as rediscovery. Every step forward revealed as one long delayed by silence. Then the forbidden grimoires, books of magic, alchemy, and summoning. The Key of Solomon, perhaps, in its original form, Enochian writings, manuals of spirits, the Philosopher's Stone. What would happen if such knowledge was released? Would humanity use it wisely or destroy itself in the attempt? And perhaps most dangerous of all the genealogies, a scroll marked with the fleur-de-lis, revealing the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Proof of descendants, a dynasty carried through centuries. To reveal this would not only shake faith, it would shake politics, royalty, power itself. Every monarchy in Europe might trace its claim anew. Every believer would question what it means to follow Christ, the Son of God, or the father of a hidden line. Finally, the maps, parchments of Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, Antarctica without ice, civilizations erased by time, revealed again. Our history rewritten not as a straight line, but as a cycle of rises and falls, of floods and fires. And the unspoken warning, if they fell, so too can we. All of this, imagine it spilling into the world at once. News agencies flashing images of giant bones, ancient scrolls, glowing relics, governments scrambling, believers flocking, skeptics silenced. Wars perhaps ignited, but wonder ignited too. Would humanity unite, finally, in the face of truth, or fracture beyond repair? Perhaps this is why the doors remain closed, why the golden key stays at the cardinal's belt, why the iron locks stay sealed. Because once the door is open, it can never be shut again. Once the truths are spoken, they can never be unsaid. And so, the archives remain a library of shadows, a vault of silence, not lost, not gone, but hidden, waiting. As you imagine it now, you see once more that heavy door. The candlelight flickers, dust gathers. Behind it lies everything: gospels, giants, gods, relics, maps, prophecies, bloodlines, history and myth, science and magic, truth and terror. And as you stand before it, you hear the question echo once more. What is being hidden, and why are we not allowed to know? Perhaps one day the door will open. Perhaps not in our lifetime, perhaps not at all. But the mystery remains, and with it, the hunger. For the Vatican archives remind us of something both haunting and hopeful. that the story of humanity is not finished, that chapters lie unwritten, sealed in shadow, waiting for the brave or the desperate to turn the key. Until that day, the door stands, silent, waiting.